Hey, what's up guys, and welcome back to another Reddit Stories video, and today we will be getting into some horrifying stories from Reddit. And this video will be long enough, so I'll keep the intro short, but these stories are great to just watch or listen to when you're studying, sleeping, relaxing, or just want to listen to a few scary stories. So thank you so much for stopping by and listening to these stories, and they're all great, so you'll want to stick around. And also, before we get into the video, please like the video and subscribe to the channel. The channel's goal is to be at 500,000 subscribers, and I think we can do that kind of soon. So please subscribe, and it would be great for you to join the community. And all right, anyways, without further ado, let's get into some horrifying stories from Reddit. My Uncle Matt never existed. My family and I have been going through a very strange experience over the last couple of months. It's hard to even put into words or explain what is going on. I guess I can just start off from where it all started to feel off. A few months back, my family had a big get-together. My parents both have two siblings. They all got married and had some kids, well, all of them except Uncle Matt. He never got married or had kids. That means I have 10 cousins. My aunts and uncles all live within 2 hours of us, so we've all grown up together. That being said, we don't normally have all my aunts and uncles in a house at once. This was a rare occasion to have a family meal when they were all free. I will not be naming every single family member in this post because that seems like a lot of information, and honestly, you've already gotten more information about my family than you ever wanted, but I promise this context is important. Okay, enough with my babbling. Let's talk about what happened that weird night. My parents and I went over to my Aunt Margot and Uncle Ken's house for a barbecue in the backyard. The backyard felt loud and chaotic. I tried to stay out of the way and get the night over with. I was honestly just there for the free food. We were all sitting down at the big table outside. I was so focused on making sure none of the napkins went flying in the wind, I wasn't even listening to the conversation. My Aunt Margot came over to the table with a plate of really burnt hot dogs. My mom immediately started to laugh at the sight of them. Is burning food genetic or something? How on earth do you guys always do that to food? The Jensens need to leave the cooking to the Millers, my mom said with a sarcastic giggle. Uncle Ken looked at her confused. What do you want about, Liz? Uncle Ken snapped back. I mean, Margot burnt the hot dogs and Matt always burns food when he cooks. Remember we had to ban him for months from cooking because we had to order takeout like 3 times in a row? Everyone at the table laughed, recalling their memories. Sighs of recollection bounced back and forth from person to person when my dad spoke up in Aunt Margot's defense. Honey, what are you talking about? Matt is your brother. I really shouldn't have to remind you of that. My mom rolled her eyes in response to my dad. I spoke up because I was suddenly confused about which side of the family Uncle Matt was actually on. You would think I would naturally just know that, but all my aunts and uncles act like siblings and call each other their siblings. My grandparents often refer to their son/daughter-in-laws as just their kids, so it isn't something I was always thinking about. Wait, I'm confused. Whose side is Uncle Matt on? What is this, the joke? I don't get it. I asked, but was only met with a laugh from all the parents at the table. I finally got an answer from my mom following the silence of the joke that somehow went over my head. Don't be silly, baby. Matt is your dad's brother. As the words left her mouth, half the table looked confused. Liz, what are you talking about? He's on your side. He's a Miller, my Aunt Margot said as she scraped off the burnt edges of her hot dog. Okay, now I'm with Amanda. I don't get the joke, my mom said while looking at me with narrow, inquisitive eyes, and then at the rest of the group. Wait. Everyone slow down, Aunt June said, speaking up for probably the first time in the night. This is dumb. Matt is not Liz and I's brother. He has to be on the Jensen side of the family. I sat at the table watching my family in silence. Their eyes darted back and forth. They stopped laughing and were all just scratching their heads. After a few minutes, my mom got out her phone. She found an old family photo from when she was a kid. In the photo were her, my grandparents, my Uncle Paul, and my Aunt June. Nothing out of the ordinary. After looking at the picture, Aunt Margot got out her phone and looked for an old childhood photo. Aha, found one, she stated as she showed off the photo on her phone. Yet again, the photo was normal. It had my grandparents, my dad, Aunt Margot, and Aunt Susan. The next hour consisted of both sides of the family going back and forth showing photos, none of them with Uncle Matt in them. I had a few of my cousins there, but they all lost interest once they ate. I, on the other hand, couldn't be pulled away. I was engrossed in learning where the heck Uncle Matt came from. They kept talking back and forth. They figured maybe he wasn't anyone's sibling. Maybe he was related by marriage or a second cousin twice removed that I just called Uncle Matt because that was the easiest thing to call him? We all have a relative like that, right? I know an easy solution you might be thinking of is to just call him up. That's also what I said, but he was working and they didn't want to interrupt him. But guess what? I needed answers, so I decided to call him. However, when I looked at my phone, I couldn't find him in my contacts. I looked through it multiple times. I remembered texting him about something a few days back, so he should have been in my text history, but still nothing. After being weirded out by his contact being gone, I mentioned out loud that someone should call him, regardless of him being at work. No one agreed with me. But once I told them his contact was missing from my phone, they all got curious and looked to see if he was missing for them too. We were all in shock to find him missing from all our phones. The family started to dig through the camera rolls and any digital libraries they had to try and find any photo of him. Uncle Andrew thought he had a photo of the back of him, but we soon found that we all remembered him looking differently. Uncle Andrew showed a picture of the back of a bald man who looked pretty tall. Aunt June called him crazy and recalled him having a long curly red hair. It wasn't like we hadn't seen him in a year or that he was some kind of distant memory. I saw the guy last week. He came over to my house to help me do some homework. And I can tell you, he didn't have red hair or no hair at all. He was, well, shoot. I can't remember what he looked like now that I think about it. It was safe to say we were all creeped out. As the sun went down and it got chilly out, the group moved inside. Normally, this is when everyone would go home, but I saw Aunt Margot start a pot of coffee. It was going to be a long night. The air was tense and full of unease. None of the adults wanted to go home until they had the answers. I could tell the adults wanted to talk more, but didn't want to worry the younger cousins. My older cousin Maddie clearly didn't care about anything that was going on. She just wanted to sleep. We convinced her to take my 3 young cousins into the basement so they could all get some sleep, but not me. I was invested. Uncle Matt and I are close. We see each other all the time. How could I not have a shred of evidence that he even existed? As my cousins shuffled downstairs, all the adults huddled around a big whiteboard Aunt Margot slapped on the kitchen table. They started to write down everything they could remember. What he looked like, the last time they saw him, memories of him. None of it was coherent. It seemed he was a completely different person in all our memories, even if it was a memory where multiple people were around. One of the only things that we could all agree on was that the Jensens always thought he was on the Miller side of the family, and the Millers always thought he was on the Jensen side. My mom recalled the story of Matt, my dad going to a lake to fish, but the hook got stuck on Matt's hat and went flying. My dad told us he remembered my mom telling him the same exact story many times. Everyone had memories of stories where he was on the other side of the family. Soon, everyone was on the phone with a new family member, trying to tell them the situation and asking what they thought about everything. My aunts and uncles were talking to realities on their phone I didn't even know. Relatives that probably only met Matt a couple of times at best. All I heard was one dead end at a time. No one knew where he came from or where he went. So the big question was, who is Matt? Was he just some random guy who weaseled his way into the family, telling one side of the family one thing and the other side another? Or was it something so much worse? As the sun came up that Saturday morning, we were all still scratching our heads. The deeper we got into who Matt was, the more freaked out everyone got. I was honestly surprised they had let me stay with them all night long. The more digging everyone did, the farther away we felt. The more rabbit holes we went down, the less real he seemed. We couldn't find any evidence that he ever existed. Some of us searched all over the internet for Matt Jensen or Matt Miller, and a few of us searched for other last names in the family. Of course, it was kind of hard to know who we were looking for, given we didn't know what he really looked like. After hours of discussion, we compiled a list of attributes that never wavered about Uncle Matt. He was a man, he never had a mustache, he was tall, he was bad at math, and he loved Jim Carrey movies. That might seem like a random grouping of facts, but that's because it was. We couldn't even remember where his house was. Some of us completely forgot, and others remembered different houses. It didn't matter. We weren't going to start knocking on doors to find a man we were concerned never existed. We started to believe that as soon as we began to question who he was, just simply started to fade away into nothingness. Like it was some kind of self-destructive on its own consciousness. It was around 9 a.m. that morning when people started to fall asleep on couches. The night before started with everyone being determined and saying the night wouldn't end until we found Uncle Matt, but here we all were, exhausted and with little to no answers. It felt like accepting defeat by napping on the couch, but we couldn't do much else. At 11 a.m., we all woke up to the sound of my cousins playing in the room next over. We all sat up and rubbed our eyes. We could practically see the gears turning in everyone's head as they woke up from their stupors. I could tell when they realized their memories actually happened and it wasn't just a weird fever dream. My Aunt Margot stumbled to the kitchen while yawning and started to dig in the pantry for something substantial the kids could eat. It was clear they had already raided the cookie stash. As the adults had a quiet conversation, we heard something come from my cousin Cass that made us freeze. "Yeah, remember last night when Uncle Matt gave us those cookies? It was so much fun," my small cousin said with a hop and a skip. "Wait, Cass, get over here and say that again," my Uncle Andrew yelled in, an attempt to sound intimidating but came out with a voice crack. Cass walking over to us, looking like a confused puppy who just got yelled at. "What did I do wrong, Uncle Andrew? I thought if Uncle Matt offered us cookies, I could have them." "Cass, you're not in trouble. This is very important. Are you telling me Uncle Matt was with you guys last night?" Uncle Andrew tried to say in a gentle tone to not scare Cass. "I mean, not the whole night, but he brought us all cookies and put us on a movie for us. Then he said he wanted to go hang out with you guys upstairs," Cass told us with a quiet voice. Everyone started to frantically look around the room, looking for any evidence of him being there last night. We quickly asked the rest of the cousins if they saw Matt, and some kids did and some didn't. I noticed something when I started to count the objects in the room. There were 10 adults and me upstairs last night, so there should have been 11 people in total, but I saw 12 plates out with the leftover crumbs from our late night pizza, 12 spots laid out for sleeping in the living room, and 12 mugs or cups of coffee. He was here last night. As I mentioned what I found, my dad said he remembered seeing him last night. He said Matt brought him some water. Uncle Paul said he saw him go to the bathroom but couldn't remember him coming out. They mentioned how it felt like it never actually happened, but he managed to place the memory in them after the fact. How else would they see Uncle Matt right in front of them and not realize what was happening? I had a strange feeling that started to bubble up. I felt uneasy and restless. "Wait, something is off here," I said loudly to the room. "Everyone line up on the wall. I want to try something." For a second, they all looked at me confused. They normally wouldn't let me boss them around like that, but they were all desperate and tired. All the adults lined up against the wall. As I walked by them, I counted out loud. Something strange happened. I counted 12 people, including me. None of the kids were lined up. I wasn't counting myself twice. There was an extra person. Uncle Matt wasn't just here last night. He was with us in the room at that moment. Other members of the family even tried to count. We did it over and over again, even adding one of the kids to the mix, but every single time there was one extra person, but we still couldn't see them. How was he hiding in plain sight? Everyone ended up leaving my Uncle Margot's house that afternoon. We were all still extremely creeped out about the whole thing, but what could we do about it? Not much. It's not like Uncle Matt ever did anything violent, mostly normal behavior except for a few memories of him that were kind of weird. One of us remembered seeing him in the kitchen, stacking and unstacking bolts for hours. Another person remembered him once packing for a vacation, but his suitcase only had trash bags in it. And I have a memory of us sitting in front of the fireplace with him reading the instruction manual to a blender for a bedtime story. At least those were the kind of memories we had in the beginning. As the weeks went on, we started to remember things that got more and more concerning. He showed up in our houses in the middle of the night, or buying us all hammers for Christmas. He once bought hundreds of dollars worth of knives and put them in my dad's car. Once we developed disturbing memories of him, we tried to tell the police. Of course, they couldn't find any evidence of his existence, so they couldn't help us. It didn't help our case that we couldn't even give them a last name. How on earth are they supposed to find a guy based on his last name being Matt and no physical features? So, who is Uncle Matt? I can say with 100% certainty, I have no clue. Is he a man? Is he an entity? Is he a figment of our imaginations, or is he nothing at all? I don't know. That's the worst part of it all. He seems to always be around at family dinners. Most of the time I count the number of people, I end up with an extra person. He feels like a virus, always implanting a memory of himself being around, but in the moment I never see him. It seems to be a family joke at this point. always leaving out an extra plate for him or something. In my opinion, no one is taking this situation seriously. I know he hasn't hurt anyone, but why should we wait for something to happen? I swear I can feel it when he shows up. The hairs on the back of my neck stand up. My family has given up on trying to figure out who or what Uncle Matt is, but I haven't. It feels like they have all just forgotten the disturbing memories of him. I swear the deeper I dig to find him, the worse the memories get. Like he is rotting and festering in my memories, right before my eyes. I'm starting to think it's his attempt to stop me from looking for him. The fact that he's punishing me for looking for him makes my concern grow more and more. Why is he suddenly running now that I am on him? Why is he so afraid of me finding him? And what will happen once I do find him? I will find you, Uncle Matt. I will find out what you are. There's a man in the baby's room. It's odd that I was dreaming about my daughter the moment before I opened my eyes and saw her peering at me beside my nightstand. In the inky darkness of my bedroom, I could just make out her 6-year-old outline, her hands threaded together at her waist, fulfilling her dubious mane when disturbing someone of authority. Chubby cheeks that always pulled her lips into a smirk, that curly blonde hair she got from her mother, who was delicately snoring beside me. I was groggy and no sunlight had penetrated the windows yet, so I knew it was the middle of the night. Lucy? Daddy, there's a man in the baby's room. Such sinister words from the sweetest voice. In a flash, I ripped the covers from my body, waking my wife in the process, then raced down the hallway, past the pictures hung on the wall, and into the bedroom on the end. With a simple flick of a switch, I was exposed to my 2-month-old son's room, the mint-colored walls, the boxes of gifted diapers from the baby shower, a basket of plush animals, a tub of pacifiers and wipes. But behind the crib, where my son Noah was sleeping, was something appalling. An intruder crawling through the window. The intruder craned his neck when the light blasted on and alerted him of my presence. It was then when I noticed the knife. The man was large, with greasy long hair and an unkempt beard. He smelled of body odor and that sour, putrid smell of vaporized drugs. I leapt into action before he could achieve a sturdy footing or leverage the knife to his advantage. I skirted the crib where my son still slept and removed a heavily bookend from the bookcase. Then, as unsupported baby books tumbled off the shelf, I bludgeoned the intruder in the arms as he flailed and teetered on the windowsill. After the intruder took several missed swipes with the knife, my aim became focused on his head. After my weapon made contact with his skull a few times, he withdrew into the backyard, lumbering awkwardly around our flower bed before hobbling over our fence and disappearing into the dark street. I picked up Noah, who thankfully was still sleeping and oblivious, and held him firmly against my chest. "What's going on? Why is the window open?" I heard my wife ask behind me as she came into the Noah's room. "Call 911 now. We just had an intruder." "What?" she laughed. "Now," I demanded, loud enough to vocally project my fear but unintentionally lifted Noah from slumber. She phoned the police as I flipped on every light switch in the house, especially the exterior ones, and cruised through the rooms with Noah on my hip, doing my best to calm him. It took 2 laps through the living room, but eventually he was calm enough for my wife and I to talk about her phone call. "Will you tell me what happened?" she asked. "Yeah, sorry I yelled earlier. I was just emotional, you know?" "It's okay, what's happened?" "Somebody was trying to break into the house through Noah's room. I forgot to lock the window after we painted his room. Remember we opened it for ventilation? I'm so sorry, honey. Something could have..." "Stop it," my wife demanded. "Noah's okay. You're okay. I'm okay. Everyone is fine." "You're right. Police are on their way. They'll find the guy. He won't be hard to pick out of the lineup, some drug-addled thief looking for a score." "What made you wake up? Was Noah crying?" I paused for a moment to consider an answer, then looked at my curious-eyed son. "Yeah. Noah's crying woke me. I feel terrible. I slept right through his crying fit." "Don't worry. Everything turned out for the best. How about some coffee, hon?" She went to the kitchen and I heard the coffee pot being washed. I took Noah to the hallway and propped his body up on my side so he was eye level with the photographs that lined the hallway. I showed my son a picture of a 6-year-old girl with blonde curls that flanked a grin between chubby cheeks. "That's Lucy, Noah. She's your big sister." Noah, with tiny, stumpy fingers, reached out and planted a palm on the frame. I always knew she would be a good sister. She died before you were born, Noah, and your mother and I miss her every day. But it's good to know she's still looking out for her little brother. I caught my grandfather talking to an air vent. My grandfather isn't the type of man who is particularly communicative. Actually, he barely bothers to speak at all unless it's a grunt of satisfaction aimed at a piece of pork chop or a prod to turn the TV channel back to golf. My mother says he's just selective with his words. I prefer to call him what he is, a dick. He's always been this way, even when I was an adorable little toddler teetering my way around his living room. He barely acknowledged me. He would just sit in his plush armchair and read the paper, ignoring my squeals of delight as I practiced my dance recital in front of him. "Pappy, Pappy, look," I would squawk in his direction. He would just shift his newspaper higher in his lap to hide me from his view. It was always Grandma who offered me any sort of grandparent-related comfort. She doted on me throughout my childhood, pinching my cheeks, baking me cookies, cooing at every sound or accomplishment I made. So when she passed away last spring, I was heartbroken. Apparently, so was my grandfather. That's when my mother cooked up the idea for a granddaughter-grandfather bonding extravaganza. She shipped me off to live with him for 2 weeks during summer vacation while she took a honeymoon with her new husband. Even though I am 15, I am purely capable of staying alone for 2 weeks. My mother just couldn't resist the opportunity to kickstart the grandfatherly affection that should have taken place the day I popped out of the womb. "You'll have fun, honey," she said earnestly as she practically kicked me out of the moving car. "He doesn't even talk," I yelled in frustration. "Yes, he does," my mother rolled her eyes. "You just have to listen." The first week and a half ticked by pretty much like I expected. We ignored each other in gruff silence and ate our meals separately, him in front of the TV and me in the guest room. It wasn't until the last night of my visit that I got up in the middle of the night to piss, only to find a light shining from his bedroom. Curious, I peeked around from around the corner. My grandfather was sitting in his armchair, a glass of scotch in his hand and eyes puffy from tears. His gaze was trained towards the air vent next to his bed. "I wish you were still here," he whispered. I could barely hear him over the clink of the ice in the glass. "You wish who were here?" I asked lightly, stepping forward. His gaze up towards me and he beckoned me to sit down on the edge of the bed. I balanced myself on the edge and looked back at him nervously. I don't think we've ever sat this close next to each other. Wordlessly, he handed me the glass of scotch. I took a sip and let the liquid bite my tongue, sending shivers down my spine. I handed it back to him. "I think it's time you know about my sister," he murmured. This is his story, in his words. "I know you don't think very highly of me. I don't think very highly of me either. Honestly, there are a lot of things I would change if I could. You're young, but you'll understand that one day. My parents and I lived here ever since I was a little boy. Back then, after the war, this place was like a castle. I loved living here. This was actually my room, believe it or not. And for an 8-year-old boy, it was my kingdom. I used to pretend that my mother and father were the king and queen and I was the prince. I would rule over my stuffed animals as if they were subjects. My parents actually encouraged it. They thought it was cute. My mother was a homemaker. Back then, most women were. So she was always around to cook and clean and play my childish games with me. My father was different. He was attentive when he was home, but he was rarely home. See, he was a preacher. He was a man of faith. When you are young, you just trust your parents. You take them on their word. You believe what they say, and you have no reason to consider otherwise. So when they told me to go to church 3 times a week, I dutifully followed through. It was fun being the preacher's son. My mother and I always seemed to bathe in a heavenly glow whenever we went. People knew us as the perfect family, a family of faith in God and virtue. My father was known as a man of God, someone the community should trust in. So when my father told me to ignore the sounds coming from the attic, I did. I first noticed the sounds the day we moved in. I was sleeping when I heard a muffled cry coming from the air vent. The cry was immediately silenced with a dull thud. I fell back to sleep instantly. For the next few weeks, I would hear the occasional pitter-patter of footsteps or the offbeat thud in the middle of the night. My father told me that We had rats. I learned to grow accustomed to the random spurts of noise, much as children do. Then one night I was playing in my room when I should have been sleeping. I held my fake sword up to my stuffed animals and pretended to knight them. I was asking them to bow down to me when I heard it. Hello? The voice was a muffled echo, barely reaching my ears. It was a girl's voice. I think that's why I paid it so much attention. I wasn't allowed to have girls in the house. Someone there? The voice echoed again. I realized at this point that it was coming from the air vent next to my bed. I quickly scrambled towards it, letting my fake sword clatter to the floor. Who's there? I asked, using the bravest voice I had. Polly. I live in attic. It's then that I noticed how childish the voice sounded, how strained it was. I bent my head closer to the vent. You my brother? The voice asked. I'm not sure. Are you my sister? I encountered. Don't know. Daddy says I have brother, but won't let me see him. Why not? Daddy says something wrong with me. Is there? I can't think real good. Oh, who's your father? I asked. Michael Larson. That's my father, I yelled excitedly. That means that you must be my sister if we have the same father. That how it work? I think so, but I guess I don't really know. I don't know either. We were silent for a little while. Why do you live in the attic? I finally asked, the question burning the roof of my mouth. Daddy say I can't leave because I'm not like everyone else. So you've never been outside? Don't think so, Polly said nervously. Not allowed to talk about it. Oh. I sat back on the bed, puzzled. I'm going to bed, I said hesitantly into the air vent. Oh. Okay, Polly answered back. Her face faltered, and for a moment I thought she was going to cry. But I'll be back, I said urgently, trying to calm her down. You will? Of course, I'm your brother, I assured her. And I your sister. The next morning I woke up excited. Not only was it Saturday, but I had a sister. I bounded down the stairs 2 at a time, eager for breakfast, like every Saturday. My mother had laid out a full breakfast spread for us. After Father led us in our morning prayer, I dug into the steaming pancakes and sausages on my plate. Whoa there, champ, my father laughed as he watched me shoveling the food into my mouth. What's the rush? I want to finish quickly so I can go play with my sister, I explained through a bite of toast. My mother's face went stone gray as if she had just seen a ghost. My father clenched his jaw and very carefully put down his fork and knife. They didn't make a sound. MJ, he said with an edge he couldn't hide. You don't have a sister. I looked up from my plate, confused. Yes, I do. She lives. Enough, my dad roared, pounding the table with his fist. My mom was now looking down at her hands folded neatly in her lap. I saw a small tear fall onto her plate. Can't you see you're making your mother upset with your lies? He hissed. But I'm not. Go to your room this instant, MJ, he demanded. And if you try to lie to us again, I promise you that you will never get to leave your room. I pushed back my chair and ran from the table, hot, messy tears sliding down my face. I threw myself onto my bed and cried at the unfairness of it all. After a few minutes, I heard her. You okay, Polly asked. Anger fled in my chest. No, I spat bitterly. I got in trouble and it's all your fault. What happened? I could hear her concern, but I didn't care. I told my dad that I had a sister and he yelled at me and grounded me. I hiccuped between sobs. You told Daddy we talked? She said in a panicked voice. Kinda. You shouldn't have done that. I could hear her voice trembling. I'm going to be in real trouble. He could kill me. Yeah, well, you deserve it, I screamed at the air vent. You ruined my whole day. I was fine before I met you. I could now hear Polly crying through the air vent. I thought her muffled sobs would make me feel better, but they only made me feel worse. Guilt bubbled in my stomach. I put a pillow over my head to drown out her crying. I must have fallen asleep because when I woke up, the pillow was on the floor and I could hear Polly again. But this time, she wasn't alone. No, she whimpered. How did you find a way to talk to him? A voice hissed at her. I immediately sat up, my heart pounding in my ears. I knew that voice. No, I be good, Polly cried back. I could hear a thump and Polly cry out. I pressed my ear closer to the event. I talked to no one. You're lying, my father's voice yelled back. No, I don't lie. I heard another thump and now Polly was crying louder. I shivered as I listened to what was happening above my head. You better be my good little girl, my father replied. You know what happens when you're a bad girl. Please, please, no. I very good. Take your clothes off. No, I don't lie. Polly's voice was interrupted by another slap. I heard her cry out, and I had to clamp my hands over my mouth so I wouldn't either. You heard me, my father challenged. Take your clothes off. I sprinted from my bedroom and ran all the way downstairs. A part of me really hoped to see my dad sitting in the living room when I rounded the corner. I prayed, I begged God that I would see my father sitting in his favorite chair. I prayed that I was just imagining things, that my creativity had gotten the better of me. But when I turned into the living room, I saw only my mother sitting rigidly on the sofa as she knitted. Mother, I said, tears were still dripping from my face. Mother, where's father? I was shaking. She looked up at me with a sad smile. He's praying, darling. Are you telling the truth? Of course, dear, she said, but her eyes told me something different. Come on now, she said. Let's listen to something on the radio. Your favorite program should be starting soon. I took my seat beside her and she turned on the radio. She hummed as she continued knitting, her mouth pressed in a firm and tight line. She held the needle so tightly that her fingertips were turning white. I love your father, she said. I know, Mother. I know. My father's knife cut through the steak as if he was cutting through butter. The meat bled lightly, just how he liked it. Are you done lying, MJ? He asked without looking up from his plate. Yes, sir, I am, I answered back. I let my imagination get the better of me. He smiled at me and pointed his knife towards my mother. And what do you have to say to the woman who gave birth to you? My face flushed red. I'm sorry, Mother. There's my good boy, he said as he continued to eat. I think you learned your lesson then. I did. The dinner talk then turned towards my church fundraiser happening the next weekend. My mother promised she would bake her famous pecan pie. My father discussed who from Bible study would be attending. After dinner, I excused myself to my bedroom. Polly, I whispered into the air vent. I heard a small series of sniffling as if she was crying. Guilt boiled in my chest. Polly, I'm sorry, I mumbled. Can you forgive me? I guess, Polly replied. Are you okay? No. I looked around my room for a second. Well, whenever I'm sad, I like to play a game, I explained as I picked up my toy sword. Do you want to play with me? Okay, well, I'll be the prince and you can be the princess, and we both have kingdoms that we can rule. Yours can be the attic and mine can be my bedroom. Does that sound fun? I heard her sniffle. I be princess? Of course, I assured her. You can be anything you want to be. And that's how it started, with a game. We would wait until I heard my father go to sleep every night, and then we would give our secret code. I would tap the inside of the air vent twice, and if she could talk, she would tap right back. Then we knew it was safe to play. Some nights we would rule over our kingdoms, while other nights I would read her stories from one of my books. Some nights we would just talk. It was nice having her around. I grew accustomed to our routine. But like all routines, sometimes they break. Sometimes I would tap into the air vent and hear nothing back except some weird groans and the occasional thud. When I would go downstairs, I would always see my father knitting silently in the living room, knuckles white. Father was nowhere to be seen. That's how I knew he was in the attic with Polly. Polly didn't like to talk much after those times. What outside like? Polly asked one night. I was lying on my back, my head toward the air vent. I pondered for a second. It's big, I guess, I said lamely. But it's cold now because it's almost Christmas time. There's a lot of snow. What's snow like? You've never seen snow? No. Well, I said, why don't I show you? Polly paused. I don't leave attic ever. I sat up on my bed. What if you left just once? I can come and get you. I can take you outside so you can see the snow. Then I can take you back. Father won't have to know. Like secret, Polly asked. I could hear the excitement bellow out of her. Outside, outside, she yelled, forgetting the hushed tones we normally used. I laughed. Yes, let's do it, I screamed as I got up in the excitement. When? Polly yelled. We can go right. Who are you talking to? My father interrupted. My face turned beet red as I turned from the air vent to face him. I was caught. No one, I mumbled weakly. I'm just playing a game. My father's eyes wandered to where my stuffed animals were, shoved away into the corner, forgotten and abandoned. With who? He challenged. No one, sir, just myself. His face turned to stone and he nodded gruffly at me. Carry on then. Just try to keep it down. And he turned out the door. I nearly shit myself with relief that he had believed me. I waited a few minutes before I spoke again. Let's wait until he goes to bed, then I can take you, I whispered. but I didn't get a response. "Polly?" I asked after a few more minutes. "Polly, do you still want to go outside?" "No," my father's voice answered back. "She doesn't." I clapped my hands over my mouth and bolted upright from my bed. "MJ," Polly answered back weakly. "Help." But I stood frozen. I didn't move when I heard thud after thud after thud. I didn't move when Polly whimpered out from her brother. I didn't move when I heard my father smack her. And I still didn't move when the attic turned as silent as the snow outside. I stood there, in the middle of my room, with my hands balled into fists at my side. I stood there as I heard my father leave the attic, his steps staggered and heavy. I stood there as I saw the porch light blink into life outside of the window. And I stood there as I watched my father digging, and digging all night long. In the morning, there was a raised patch of dirt under the maple tree that wasn't covered with snow like the rest of the backyard. And the air vent was silent. My grandfather put down his glass and stared back towards the air vent. The room seemed heavier now. Her name was Polly, I asked. He nodded. "Like you," he smiled weakly. "When you were born, I asked your mother to name you Polly. Does she know why?" "She knows I had a sister. She doesn't know much else." I was silent for a second. "What did you do after it happened?" My grandfather looked down into his drink. "Nothing. Just like what I did when it was happening." "What was wrong with her?" I asked slowly. Why did your father keep her locked away?" He was silent for a moment before he took a swig of his drink. "I think she had Down syndrome. I think my father was ashamed of that," he sighed. "Grandpa, Don't," he interrupted. "It's not necessary." We sat in silence for a few minutes, listening to the gentle hum of the air vent. "Polly would have made a fine princess," I whispered. He smiled, and for a second, I could have sworn that I saw the flicker of what he had been like as an 8-year-old boy. "Yes," he agreed. "She would have." And I accidentally participated in the Harvard wormhole experiment. They gave me $1 million to keep my trap shut, and I did for 15 years. But last night I was making the rounds and I saw the professor again. I had a heart attack 3 years back, and I tell you, when I saw him standing there in front of room 204, I felt another one coming on. He turned and smiled, and it was like he hadn't aged a day in 15 years. "Hey there, Chief," he said. And that was it. I dropped my clipboard on the ground and hightailed it out of there, never looking back. What I'm about to tell you is liable to make me sound crazier than a 3-horned goat, but I promise you, there's crazier things out there. The cops don't believe me. The official story is that the professor and those students died 15 years ago. Room 204 just up and exploded. They said, "Damn this thing." And there's some truth there, but the room did explode. But it wasn't an accident. We knew exactly what we were doing, or we thought we did. They call me an assistant supervisor of maintenance, but really I'm a janitor and always have been. You might wonder why I'm still at it after getting that $1 million. That dough is for Junior, so he doesn't have to go through the same shit that I did. The night this happened, I was assigned to the Astrophysics Center, a bit northwest of the main Harvard campus. Until that night, this was always my favorite beat. I mean, God help you if you wound up at one of the biology labs. Those goddamn dead, cut open animals all over the place used to give me nightmares. And really, thinking back, I'd take those nightmares of mutilated and scattered organs any night over the stuff that has haunted me ever since. Anyway, I was there mopping the hallway on the second floor of the lab building when the door to room 204 opened up and this guy popped his head out. "Hey, you!" I looked around to make sure he was talking to me. Yes? Can I help you, sir?" I thought he was going to bitch about the room being a mess or something. "How'd you like to make $1,000, Chief? An hour's work at most. Easy money. Does that sound good to you?" It sure did. Things were tight at home, as they always were. $1,000 would knock off some of those long overdue bills, but I was also on a tight schedule. They didn't give you much breathing room. "Don't want you standing around thinking about it all, I guess." "That sounds great, sir," I said, "but I gotta stick to my beat." The man laughed. "We're about to make history, Chief," he said. "And you're worried about emptying the bathroom trash? Come on, don't sweat it. You won't get in much trouble, I promise. I'm a professor here. I'll vouch for you." The guy did look like a professor, with carefully combed gray hair and big old glasses on his face. I shrugged, leaned my mop against the wall and said, "Sure. What do I have to do?" "That's fantastic. Come on in, Chief. Come on in." I followed him into the room. One look and I should have just turned around then and there and told him to keep his damn money, but I didn't. As soon as I stepped in, I felt the little hairs all over my body stand up. I don't mean I was scared. I mean like there was an electrical charge in that room, and I had a guess about where it was coming from. There, in the center of the room, on a round table, was a large glass globe crackling with electricity, like what you see if you go into a kid's science museum. Like they somehow created a lightning storm in a glass ball. This one was sort of vibrating around on its stand and buzzing, and the lightning inside was black. I could feel the electricity coming from it, from across the room. There were 4 kids there, students, I guessed, sitting in a row of chairs along the wall. More than sitting. They were strapped into those chairs, with metal things over their heads, like those big bowls things you see at a hair salon. They all had their eyes closed. I said. What's going on here? Those kids okay?" "They're quite fine," said the professor. "As to what is going on, as I said, we're about to make history. We're going to open the first wormhole." "Wormhole?" I said. "Like in the movies?" My professor laughed. "I suppose so, Chief," he said. "Now listen, we had a last-minute cancellation. And that's okay because it's an easy job. We're going to be kicking things off here shortly. And once they are properly kicked off, the wormhole will open. I will enter. If I'm not back in 30 minutes, you are to pull that lever there, and this will close the wormhole." I looked to where he was pointing, at a big red lever attached to a giant whirling machine that was hooked up to the metal bowls over the students' heads. "But won't you be trapped on the other side of the wormhole?" I asked. Not that I had the slightest idea of what the hell was going on. "Just so, Chief," said the professor. "We've got this down to 2 possibilities. 1, the wormhole opens up to what we're calling the second universe. The best way that I can explain the possibility is that there's a different reality that exists on the other side of this one, the other side of an invisible wall. The wormhole will provide a door in that wall. And the other possibility? That the wormhole will open to a place that man is not meant to go. 30 minutes will give me enough time to get in and out if the first possibility is true. And if it's the second, then you'll close the hole with that lever, and my students will destroy my work." This was all way above my pay grade, and my head was spinning. Why only 2 possibilities? How the hell did they come up with those 2? And if this real, why the hell would the professor take a coin toss chance of getting stuck in the place that man was not meant to go? I mean, those were just starter questions among the swarm that was buzzing around my head. "I see that you have some reservations," said the professor. "I assure you that your job is to pull that lever after 30 minutes. That's it, Chief. We'll take care of the rest, and anything that happens isn't on you. The documentation is quite in order." He tapped a folder that was sitting on the circular table. "And here, I'll write you a check now, before we proceed." As he wrote out the check, I wondered if it would still be valid if he got swallowed up in the wormhole. I actually had that thought, as crazy as it sounds. It was still all so weird and abstract to me at that point. "Here," he said, handing over the check. "Let's do it, Chief. As soon as I enter that hole, give me exactly 30 minutes on the dot. That's all you have to do." I took the check, mumbled a thanks, and watched as he walked over to the machine. He pulled the lever. There was a loud cracking sound, and I watched in unease as one by one the students' eyes shot open. There were no pupils there, like their eyes were rolled back in their sockets. "Hey now," I said, taking a step towards the machine. "They are quite fine," said the professor. "I assure you." Their jaws started to move like they were grinding their teeth. The professor took a jar of neon blue liquid from a shelf on the wall. He unscrewed the lid and poured the stuff over the electric globe on the round table. The thing started going crazy, and then the globe shattered completely, bits of glass flying through the air as shoots of black lightning zapped out into the room. I ducked down. I had had enough by then, and was ready to get the hell out of there. Then it happened. A fucking black hole appeared in the middle of the room, sucking in the bolts of electricity. It grew larger and larger until it took up half the room. All I could hear was its rushing sound, like the world's largest vacuum cleaner running at full throttle. "Remember, Chief," shouted the professor, with a wild look on his face. 30 minutes exactly. Then he stepped into the thing and was gone. At first, my mind was a mess, staring at this whooshing black hole that seemed hungry to suck everything in. I looked at the kids hooked up to the machine, their eyes rolled black. White holes. I guess they looked like their jaws grinding away like crazy. It was too much to make sense of. I looked down at my watch. 15 minutes and 31 seconds had gone by since the professor got swallowed up by the wormhole. My heart was pounding and I kept pacing back and forth, trying to work out what the hell was going on. Then I started to zero in on it. I was getting pranked. Not a prank like we used to do as kids, setting dog shit on somebody's front steps and all that idiocy. I mean a prank like these sophisticated college folk do, where they tell you something's going on, but the whole point is to just observe your reaction. A psychological experiment. Probably cameras in here watching me right now. See what I do. 12 minutes to go. I saw a trickle of blood come down from one of the kids' nose. I leaned down to look at him closely. He was shaking a little bit, all over. If I throw that lever, this will probably stop. Maybe that was the test. I had to decide between trapping the professor in the black hole and saving the kids hooked up to the machines. None of it was real, of course, but they didn't know that I knew that. But then, screaming in the back of my mind was that voice. What if it is real? 10 minutes to go. The professor had promised me that the kids were all right. Another one started bleeding from the nose. If it wasn't real, it was a hell of a trick. Where did the professor go, if not through that black hole? I thought about touching it, but whenever I got close, I was filled with total terror. It sure seemed real. Like it really took you someplace far, far away from here. I walked over to the table and picked up the folder that was there. Just like the professor had said. The first page was instructions to shut down the machine and destroy it if he didn't return within 30 minutes. I flipped that page over, and the next one had a photograph of one of the students. I read what it said. It was a consent form. I, Jackson Stewart, acknowledge the possibility of imminent death if I participate in this experiment. I'm prepared to give my life to science. I flipped that page, and there were 3 more just like it. Now, I'm no lawyer, but there was no way in hell that was an experiment was legal. If it was real, even with those consent forms, so it probably wasn't real. And if it was, then the professor lied to me. He had said that the kids were fine. This folder was telling me something else. 2 minutes to go. I took a deep breath and paced the room, watching each second tick by. My mind was telling me that none of it was real, but my gut was screaming in horror. I just looked at my watch. It'd be over soon enough, one way or the other. 30 seconds. I walked over to the machine and put my hand on the lever. God damn it, why is he cutting it so close? I watched the seconds tick by. I didn't know if I could do it. I didn't know if I could risk trapping the professor wherever the hell he had gone off to. 5 seconds, my hand was shaking. 4 seconds, sweat was pouring down my face, dripping into my eyes. 3 seconds, one of my students started to moan. The one that I saw was named Jackson in the folder. 2 seconds, oh God, oh God, oh God. 1 second, Jackson started to shake. 0 seconds. Shit. I tensed my muscles to pull the lever. One look at Jackson, and I knew I had to pull it. He was violently jerking around now. Wait! I snapped my neck around to see the professor's head sticking out of the black hole. Wait, damn it! Then his shoulders went through. I turned back to Jackson. Blood was pouring out of his eyes. I'm almost through. A second kid started to shake. 1 more second. I looked to see that the professor was through. He was back in the room. Do it, he shouted. 2 things happened after that, at the exact same time. I heard a wet popping sound, and I watched as the wormhole disappeared, as though it was never there. But I had never pulled that lever. I slowly turned to look at Jackson. His head was gone. Judging by the bits of brain and splatters of blood on the bowl thing above his neck, his head had just exploded. The whirling of the machine gradually died down, and then it was silent. The 3 kids who were still alive stopped shaking and closed their eyes. A tragedy, said the professor, pointing at Jackson with the exploded head. But not for nothing. I've been there. I've seen it. Chief, I've seen it. I hunched over and puked. It was weird, but my first thought was, what a mess I'll have to clean up later. I don't know. I guess my mind had sort of shut down and I was going on autopilot. I was the janitor. I cleaned up messes. That was all I knew. Then it hit me, the reality of what had happened. You son of a bitch, I yelled. You told me those kids would be okay. The professor put this sickening, smug grin on his face. He would have been, Chief. Had you pulled the lever at the 30-minute mark as instructed. You told me to wait. Did I? Yes, you fucker. I'm calling the police. I had a walkie clipped to my belt. It wouldn't give me the police, but it would give me campus security. I reached for it and had it in my hand when I heard a groan beside me. I turned to see that it was one of the kids. They were waking up. I went over to unstrap them from the chairs. The first kid's eyes blinked open. And when she saw the professor, she started screaming. It's okay, I said. Shh, it's okay, it's okay. It's all over. She kept screaming. Then the second kid woke up. He looked right at me with wide, terrified eyes. Get us out of here, he shouted. I'm working on it, kid, I said, fumbling at the straps. They were on tight. The third kid woke up. It's here, she said. It made it through. Everything's okay now, I said. Your friend didn't make it, I'm afraid, but it's over. I'll make sure the professor pays for what he did to you and your friends. The first kid was still screaming at the top of her lungs. Get us out of here, shouted the second kid again. The third kid looked at me dead in the eyes and, in a totally calm voice, said, That's not the professor. What? Of course it is, I said. What I saw when I turned to look at the professor will haunt me forever. The professor's mouth was twisting around at odd angles, like something was moving the lower half of his jaw randomly, or like he was trying to get a hair out of his mouth that kept jumping around. The veins on his neck bulged, then sunk back down, then bulged again, so that they were thick as ropes. His wrists were rotating in ways they weren't supposed to rotate, as his arms flailed around wildly. I had the first kid, the screaming one, free. She jumped out of the chair and ran to the door, but her legs were wobbly, and she tripped over herself in the middle of the room. I went to work on the second kid, whipping my head around every second to look at the professor. It looked like there was something crawling around under his skin. Something big. Get us out of here, the second kid shouted yet again. The first kid was still on the ground, screaming. I worked away furiously on the straps. If you believe in God, said the third kid with an eerie calm, then pray. I took a glance at the professor, and that's when the first bone burst out of his chest, through his suit. I call it a bone, but it was pure black, and dripping with green slime. As for me, said the third kid, I do not believe that there is a God. Not after what I have seen. The second kid was free and made a run for it. I scooted over to the third kid, but watched as the professor reached out an arm and grabbed the second kid by the top of his head. The professor gave one quick twist and let go. I heard a terrible snap, and the kid slumped to the ground. Dead. 3 more black bones came out of the professor's chest, dripping. He laughed and bent down to the first kid, who was still screaming, as bones began to poke out of his back like a fucking stegosaurus from hell. What is that thing, I asked as I fumbled as the strap, said the last kid. It does not belong here, said the kid. No shit, I said, getting one strap free, but what is it? It comes from a terrible place. A place where there's nothing save pain. Endless pain, incomprehensible to our minds. Great, I muttered, as I noticed with a sinking heart that the screams from the girl behind me had stopped. Then I heard a wet crunch. I couldn't help it. I looked to see the professor tearing into that poor girl's throat with a long black fang, dripping in green slime. I turned back to the kid, almost done with the straps. Just a few more seconds. What's your name anyway, kid? Claire. Claire, I said, my mind trying to stay focused. When I get you out of these straps, I want you to pick up this chair and throw it at that thing, okay? I'll do the same thing, okay? Then we make a run for it. Do you understand? Can you do that? I understand, said Claire. I do hope it works. I did hope it would work too. We have to make it work, Claire, I said, yanking off the last strap. Come on. We stood up together and reached over to pick up a chair. I hurled it at the professor with all of my strength, and it shattered against his boned back. I heard a terrible shriek then, and watched as Claire's chair followed behind. I grabbed Claire's arms with one hand and reached for my pocket knife with the other. The only way out of that room meant passing by the professor. We started running as I pulled the knife out and it flicked up. The professor stood still shrieking as the green slime mixed with the red blood from the kid's throat and dripped down his chin. It took a wild stab at the professor's neck and connected. I kept running with Claire, leaving the knife stuck in the professor's neck, and made it to the door. I had my hand around the knob when I felt Claire pulling away from me. I looked back, helpless, as I saw the professor reach long black claws into her gut. I threw the door open and left her there. Good God, I left her there. I made it outside the lab building somehow. I don't remember how. My mind just sort of shut down as I ran like hell, I guess. I did have the presence to go around and lock all the doors from the outside. Then I got on the radio to campus security. You guys need to get the police over to the Astrophysics Center fucking ASAP. There was a fucking massacre in there. The front door started to rattle, and I heard the god-awful shriek again. Repeat, said a voice over the walkie. Look, I said, call up Lawrence Summers right now. That was the president of Harvard at the time, and I'd seen his signature on the papers in that folder with all of the consent forms. Tell him that wormhole experiment had gone way the fuck south. The rattlings at the door stopped. I only prayed that the thing didn't figure out I could just break a window and crawl out that way. This is the janitor, right? Said a different voice on the other end of the walkie. Is this a joke, the wormhole experiment? Have you been drinking? Call Lawrence Summers. If you don't, I promise you that you'll never be able to live with yourself. Do it now. There was a horrible pause. I heard the professor trying the side door now, shrieking once again. 10-4. A fleet of black SUVs pulled up 2 minutes later. A team of heavily armed men jumped out and ran past me, breaking through windows and jumping inside. I heard a stream of gunfire and screams, so many screams, and the professor's horrible shrieks. After a while, it was quiet, and a second team of men jumped through the broken windows. I didn't hear any more gunfire. I felt a hand on my shoulder and whipped around. A man was standing there. I don't remember a single thing about what he looked like, but I remember our conversation. "Tell me what happened," he said. I told him the full story, the same one that I've told you. "We are prepared to give you a lot of money to sign an NDA. NDA? Non-disclosure agreement. It means that you can never tell anybody about what happened here tonight." "How much?" $1 million. And a promotion. The man paused. "You mean you still want to work here after tonight?" "Somebody's got to clean up that shit," I said. "Fine, of course. And one more thing." "And what's that?" asked the man. "I want to know that this will never happen again. I want you to blow all that shit up and burn all the notes." "Of course. And I want to watch." "Of course," said the man. And so I thought it was over. But it's not. Last night I saw the professor again. He looked me right in the eyes, flashed that smug grin, and said, "Hey there, Chief." That's when I ran the hell out of there. The police don't believe me. I've sent a dozen emails to Lawrence Summers' assistants. I've called every number that I found listed for him. I haven't heard anything back. I don't know what else to turn to. I'm afraid the professor is going to open the wormhole again, and I'm afraid this time he might bring his friends back with him. And alright guys, that wraps up Horrifying Stories from Reddit. I really hope you enjoyed this video. I enjoyed recording it, and all these stories were super interesting, and definitely my favorite was the wedding one. I thought that was interesting. So let me know what your favorite story was down in the comments below. That'd be awesome, and thank you so much for watching to the end of the video. That means so much. And also like and subscribe to the channel if you haven't already. I mean, you watched to the end of this video, so that means you'll probably like other videos, so consider watching a few other videos of mine. And yeah, thank you so much for watching. Until next time, see ya.